92.7 WOBM, Shawn Michaels with you. And, if you love music and you love the Beatles and John Lennon, then you want to read Lennon on Lennon, Conversations with John Lennon. Joining us right now is the editor of this project, Jeff Berger, joins us. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning. Good to be here.
All right, let's talk about it. Describe, first of all, what is Lennon on Lennon for our listeners?
It's a collection of conversations that were conducted with him between 1964 and the early days of Beatlemania and 1980. The last interview was conducted a few hours before his death.
Now, you've dictated actual interviews. You're reading Lennon's own words when you're reading the book. Is that kind of how it would be a good way to put it?
Right. It's transcribed interviews. There are a few that are taken from print. But the bulk of them are first aired on radio or on television.
A lot of the interviews, the content has not been available before, correct?
Yeah, it has not been available. Most of it's not been available in print, and more than a third of it has not been widely available in any format, which amazed me when I got into this. With my publisher who first proposed this book, and my first thought was, why do we need another Beatles book? Because there's, shelves full of Beatles books and John Lennon books, and yet these really illuminating and valuable interviews had not been anthologized. Most of them were just not in print.
Do you gain more insight into John Lennon by reading his own words back? Because this is something different.
Yeah, I think you do. He never did an autobiography, and of course the biographies were all filtered through somebody else's lens. And this is him talking, and it's in chronological order, so you see all the changes he went through the years. I found it to be a real eye opener.
Is there anything that surprised you by doing your research as you went through the interview? So was there something that stood out to you and you said, that was kind of surprising, or did you, go into it with a preconceived idea of what Lennon might be like?
It had been a while since I'd read any Lennon biographies, but I was surprised by the extent of his openness. For instance, we all know that he posed nude a couple of times, and that turned out to be very symbolic of the way he lived his life. I called I put the subtitle of this book as Conversations rather than Interviews, because he didn't really do a lot of formal Q&As. He liked to sit around and exchange ideas with people, and he was extremely open, talking about his marriage and the other Beatles and his music and his life. I was also surprised by the extent to which he changed over the years. The Beatles went from I Want to Hold Your Hand to Strawberry Fields Forever in 3 years, and he changed just as rapidly. He was a tongue-tied kid in the first interview, and he was a sophisticated commentator on the world scene by the end of the book. And in between, he did a lot of backs and forths. He was very close to political leaders like Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, the Yippies, and then disavowed them. He was enthusiastic about being in the Beatles, and then he described that as a horror show, and then in the later years he looked back on it fondly. So it was interesting to see how he changed.
It's interesting that one of the final interviews you talk about how it discusses how he discussed mortality and looked ahead to the future, when in fact it would be one of his final, or if not his final interview before his death after being assassinated by Mark David Chapman. That had to be a kind of, I guess, I don't know if eerie is a good word for it, but had to be, as you research it and you're listening to that interview or reading about that interview, it has to be, very solemn when you know the end result.
Yeah, exactly. That last interview in the book that you're talking about was actually conducted hours before he was killed. It was his last interview. And, to read that and know what happened and hear him talking about how excitedly he looked forward to the 1980s, and he thought this was the beginning of a big new chapter, and he looked forward to touring and so on. It's particularly sad when you know what happened. I think there's even a chance that he would have, based on what he says in the book, that the Beatles would have performed together again. He hints at that several times.
Yeah. We were talking with Jeff Berger. The book is called Lennon on Lennon, Conversations with John Lennon. How do we go about getting the book, Jeff? Where bookstores, Amazon, just hit everywhere, huh?
Absolutely. It's everywhere. It's on Amazon, and it's should be in your local bookstore. And can I mention my website?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, there's more information about this and as well as my Springsteen and Leonard Cohen books and my other music writing on my website, which is byjeffberger.com. That's BYJEFFBURGER.com.
Yes, and for fans, of course, with us living here at the Jersey Shore, Bruce Springsteen is an icon. Jeff, of course, did very much the similar type of book with Bruce Springsteen, which is also out in publication as well. So Springsteen fans can get Springsteen on Springsteen. So that's pretty cool, too, for us here.
Yeah, Springsteen I actually interviewed in his early days, and that's in that book. And before he was known at all.
Excellent. Well, folks could get information on your website about that as well. Jeff, thanks for taking time, and I'll be, of course, over the winter months reading both those books, and I thank you for spending some time with us, and glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, there he is, Jeff Berger. Thanks. And the book is Lennon on Lennon. Get details at WOBM.com.